Good evening. Hey, it says that you're on live, but I can't see you. Can you talk to me in the chat so I know what's going on? Okay, that suggests a sense another live. Oh my God, I hope I'm getting this right. Accept.
Here we go. Hi.
Oh my God, Dr. Jess, you look
Oh, thank
gorgeous.
you. Thank you so much.
For a very hands-on mom, let me tell you,
Uh,
you look nothing like what you do on a day-to-day basis.
oh, yeah, I had to dress up for this. Well,
Girl, you look
it gives
dressed
me an
up.
excuse to, get cute.
I'm telling you, we need any excuse just to get
Right.
dressed. Now I'm taking my cue from you. Hi, Dr. Jess. I'm so excited to be having this
Yes.
conversation with you. And I just want to let you know that I love your bravery. Let me tell you, because these are the kind of things that we need. I know that it's hard to tell our stories, but these stories is what is going to, as we say in PSI, help people climb out of the
Yes,
darkness, right?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We are tearing down the culture of shame and isolation and just
Mhm.
sitting in the corner of your world and thinking, you're the only one.
Right.
You are not the only one.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. And even though they say it's two in every thousand, two lives matter in every
Yes,
thousand. That's a
ma'am.
lot. That's one in 500.
Hmm.
And so those statistics, they sound, at PSI would like to say, oh, they sound small, but when you put it in perspective, two in a thousand is one in 500. That's
Correct.
not a lot,
That is.
right?
That is.
I wish I could give you a hug, but let me tell you,
Oh,
imagine me
one
giving
day
you a
we'll be
hug.
able to give each other a hug because I need to get out there to Nigeria.
One day, I was going to come to PSI conference this year, but oh my goodness, getting our papers sorted from Nigeria is a story for another day. So I'm
Hmm.
just going to go ahead and read your
Yes, ma'am.
profile, which is extremely understated, by the way. Dr. Jess is way more amazing than this, let me
Thank
tell
you.
you. All right, so meet Dr. Jess B. She's a resident of sunny Arizona. Dr. Jessica Brett. Oh my goodness, I did not practice pronouncing that
Creighton.
because I'm used to just saying Dr. Jess B.
Hmm.
So we're all going to stick to Dr. Jess B today. She's affectionately called Dr. Jess B by all, myself inclusive. Is a family dentist, a speaker, an author, and a mentor. She has a practice in the Valley of the Sun since 2015. Dr. Jess B served as owner and lead dentist of private dental practice Breton Family Dental (PC) for 5 years, where she passionately provided comprehensive family dentistry to multi-generational families of the Phoenix metropolitan area. Upon answering the call for greater impact and purpose, Dr. Jesby recently transitioned from private practice ownership to non-profit work, advocacy, community empowerment, and consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Dr. Jesby. All right,
Thank you
now,
so much.
I mean, like all that sounds really glowing and
Hmm.
dashing, but the most important reason Dr. Jess B is here is that she's our real life specimen today. All right. Many of us, doctors inclusive, psychiatrists inclusive, psychologists inclusive, would say that they could go their entire career without seeing any woman present with postpartum psychosis.
Hmm.
So, pardon me, but you are our real life experience today. and we're talking about postpartum psychosis. And oh, I have never met anyone. And in this part of the world, there's all kinds of cultural and traditional ways that we see and perceive psychosis in general,
Yes, ma'am.
but then postpartum psychosis. That adds like a kind of, fresh layer to it. So for those people who do not know, postpartum psychosis is a complete break with reality. This is how we describe it at PSI. It's a complete breakdown with reality, from reality, and we kind of see ego syntonic thoughts. So with intrusive thoughts, we have ego dystonic
Mm-hmm.
thoughts. So you're worried about what you're thinking. They are making you anxious. They're making you nervous. You're doing things to counter those thoughts and be in
Yeah.
control. But with psychosis, we have ego syntonic, which means that your mind agrees with what you're thinking, no matter how unrealistic it is. It is a medical emergency, but people who are psychotic are not very likely to know that they're psychotic. And that's
Correct.
why the importance of education cannot be overstated. All of us need to understand what these things are, not because we may be impacted by it directly, but because we may need to be that person who gets help for somebody who is impacted by it. As I said, it's a medical emergency. Such a person needs to get help ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Jessie, I will stop talking because I do not have the qualifications to talk or the experience. We're leveraging on yours today. So, in your own professional and personal experiences, how would you describe postpartum psychosis?
I mean, it's pretty much classical to the definition. It's a break from reality, essentially. I do know that it is not um, all of a sudden. There are early stages, early signs that exist of psychosis, and it kind of the symptoms kind of wax and wane. It's not like the person just all of a sudden just has a break and then now we have to respond. But there are little bits of signs that start to progress. And eventually, once it becomes full on, then you have a complete medical emergency. And so, from my own personal experience, it started off with postpartum anxiety. And then it ended up, aside from just being worried about something happening to my children and constantly fearing, what if something happens really terribly, I also started to be obsessive compulsive as it related to like just keeping them safe. I started to become paranoid, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. The biggest thing was the thoughts of um, grandiose nature, where I felt like I was really, really important and my child was really, really important, that people were just trying to, gain access to my son. And so during those thoughts, sometimes you're not even actually communicating them with people because you're afraid to share. Um,
Right.
and I think it took several days before someone was able to recognize, and it was actually my mom who in her social work background was able to identify that something was not quite right after several days of escalating. And from there, she took action, and I ended up being committed into a behavioral health or psychiatric hospital here in the state of Arizona.
Well, that's amazing. Thank God for your mom.
Yes.
So what we always wonder, so is postpartum psychosis a standalone thing, or does it kind of what's the word now? Does it trickle down from other symptoms? So we know there's anxiety and depression and all the things that are, well, almost super common for moms everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that it starts from something? So can anxiety and depression just degenerate all the way to psychosis, or is psychosis just a thing on its own?
I mean, I believe that there are isolated incidences where you can jump from A to Z, but in most cases, there are going to be, some signs that are fitting in the category of anxiety, depression. Postpartum OCD is something a lot of people don't know about, but that exists as well. And then, of course, when you start adding in those delusional thoughts that become real to the person suffering with the condition, most of the time, we or the person who's actually experiencing the psychosis doesn't realize that the thoughts are not real. They don't realize that the
Right.
voices are not real, the ideas are not real. It's all just a part of the symptoms of psychosis. And so, without careful observation and connection with a community or a village of support to aid in identifying these things, that's when you have those people that are lost through the cracks over time because we're just not looking for it. And personally speaking, I had no idea what postpartum psychosis was when until I was diagnosed with it. I knew of stories and the headlines in the U.S. that of women, and to be quite honest, I thought it was something that really affected just white women, not people that look like me, you know. And so,
Right.
upon actually sharing my story, I had a lot of people that look like us who reached out to me like, oh my gosh, that's what I was experiencing, when they were, you know, talking about their own personal stories of dealing with suicide ideation and things like that. So it's definitely necessary for us to raise awareness and to ensure that in our community in particular, we are equipped with the ability to not only identify, but then from there provide the appropriate resources to get help.
Right. So, talking about resources to get help, I know that we live, I don't know, millions, thousands of kilometers apart, but what would be the first response? I mean, like people in the family or friends or people you see every day. I was watching your interview the other day and they were talking about, your hairdresser, people that you're close to who know you, who know the typical you,
Mm-hmm.
will usually be the first responders to say,
Mm-hmm.
this is not this person. So, what kind of, in terms of other people who are around these moms, what kind of way should they respond? What should be the typical first responder approach to supporting a mom who might be, showing signs of postpartum psychosis?
Well, I mean, almost always, with it being a medical emergency, immediately contact whomever that medical provider is. In my case, I did have a home birth. And so my mom immediately contacted my midwife, and my midwife was able to give her the resources. In the process of that, she also reached out to my OBGYN, which is the obstetrician gynecologist, to see if they can get me in for an appointment. But essentially, they were just trying to get me to that point. But the crazy thing about it was I was 6 weeks beyond 6 weeks postpartum when I developed
Right,
postpartum psychosis. A lot of people develop it within the first 1 to 2 weeks following childbirth, and so in my case,
right,
it was more of a delayed response based on the actions that or the circumstances that precipitated, you know, the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, and paranoia. But nevertheless, as soon as it's identified, we want to make sure that appointments are made for the mother to see the provider so that they can get the necessary medical support. Sometimes,
absolutely.
however, I've heard of instances where the mother would have to just be taken to a behavioral health facility. Now, everyone has their own take on how to go about this, but my family, being that I am a doctor of general medicine and widely known in the area that I practice, my family wanted to maintain my dignity. So, in the midst of me being at the peak of psychosis at home, they didn't want um, behavioral health workers to come to my home and, you know, capture me and then take me to the hospital. They just wanted to maintain the dignity of who I
Absolutely.
was and who I am, despite the condition in that moment. And so they just told me that they were going to take me somewhere to get me help. And in my mind, I didn't even know what they were talking about. I thought that, you know, someone was after me and I was going to a witness protection
Mm,
program. But with them saying that, we're here to support you, we just want to get you some help, they took me to the behavioral health facility. And then after that, several days passed and I realized why I was actually there. But long story short, connecting with the provider and then also locating the nearest behavioral health facility that will be able to accommodate the condition and bring the mother back to herself.
that's amazing. I think the most beautiful part of the story is maintaining the dignity,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that a lot of moms would be separated from their children, which I hear further exacerbates the
Yeah,
issue.
it does.
So when you take a mom who is psychotic and then, she hasn't seen her baby, that just makes things worse because she's wondering, okay, where's my baby?
Yeah.
So I think that I'm holding on to maintaining that dignity, even when you're getting them help, even when they are completely cut off from reality and they are not themselves. It's important that we hold on to treat them with dignity, and ensure that, they have some form of supervised connection with their babies. I think
Yeah.
that for me is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, is there any particular thing that would cause it. So because I mean you're quote unquote a regular woman with her baby, with her family, with her career. So are there any triggers or anything that would cause postpartum psychosis?
Well, I mean, I think that we always have to take into consideration a person's history, but familial history is one of the biggest components to increased risk of postpartum psychosis. So if we have a family history of bipolar disorder, or a family, it doesn't have to be the actual mother. It can be, her mother, her aunt, her grandmother, any
Mm,
familial history of any type of mental health disorder, depression, all of those things can increase the risk. A lot of women, more than half of women who have the diagnosis of postpartum psychosis, don't personally have mental health conditions prior to experiencing this. And so it's just important to know the medical history as it relates to the family first, to identify increased risk in mothers who may be at risk for developing the condition. Aside from that, I do know for me personally, um, getting well, my background was one that preceded a lot of trauma. I had experienced a lot of deaths leading up to this. My birth was a little traumatic. There was just a lot of things that um, caused trauma during that time, and so because of that, it can affect your sleep. And sleep is a number one way of aiding in reducing the signs and ultimately healing from postpartum psychosis. If you're getting
mm,
adequate rest, that break from reality will cease to exist. And so the number one objective during treatment was to get me to go to sleep, make sure I'm getting a full night's rest. And so when you notice that a mother is not sleeping, the primary goal is to make sure she's resting to help mitigate those risks. But more than anything, if you're not getting adequate rest, if you have a familial history, and if there are traumatic incidences that are occurring around the same time of the birth, more than likely you will be kind of the unicorn that ends up developing this condition, unfortunately. And so it was in my
absolutely.
case.
Absolutely. I think I've heard of sleep. We always joke that, sleep is a form of torture. If you watch the crime scene
Yeah.
movies and everything, they put you up somewhere, ensure you don't sleep. I mean, by day three, a person is hallucinating. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like, and that is not with all the stress the normal stresses that comes with motherhood, that
Mm-hmm.
just sends us down a
Mm-hmm.
spiral. So, um, okay, so you've talked about it being prevented. So are there any ways to prevent? So if someone, for example, has some of this family history or some form of predisposition
Mm-hmm.
to psychosis, are there ways that, I mean, you've mentioned mom getting a ton of sleep, but are there other ways that this can be prevented? Can it be prevented, and what ways?
That's something that I definitely need to look into. I don't believe, only from anecdotal experiences can I really speak on this, but I do believe that the only real prevention is just having the knowledge, and then also just making sure that mom has a great support system in place. Because
Absolutely.
although we say it's rare, it's not actually rare. It's about as rare as Down syndrome. It's about as rare as autism. And we know that these things are prevalent if we actually are looking for them. And so I think that having the actual knowledge and the ability to be able to understand what the signs and symptoms are, and then simultaneously having a support system ready to respond should something go awry, will be the greatest prevention as you could possibly have, aside from just making sure mom is getting rest, adequate nutrition, and then just being honest, having a person there
Mm,
to communicate with, because I do feel that sometimes we can be very pretentious as moms. We hold on
right.
to this superhero cape very tightly because our grandma and our mother have done all the things, so we feel like we have to do all the things. But when we first give birth, our primary goal should be to rest, to bond, and to heal. And all the other things can wait. And I think that if we take off the cape just for a little while, and we empower moms to know that taking the cape off doesn't mean that you're no longer a superhero, but right now you need to rest. I think it'll help ultimately to change the trajectory of this becoming more prevalent in our community.
Right. Rest, bond,
Mm-hmm.
heal. Mamas, you heard it. Rest, bond, heal. Not not snap back.
Not snap
Right?
back. And yeah, that culture is like, no, it has to go. Mm-mm. snapback will come,
It,
but you need to snap back to reality and realize resting, bonding, and healing is your utmost importance.
I love it. I love it. Rest, bond, heal. I wrote that down. I'm going to go think of what to do with it. Okay, so are there any long-term effects? In the part of the world where I live, there's a lot of stigma and a lot of uh, ways that issues like psychosis, whether it's postpartum or otherwise,
Mm,
is viewed. And there's a lot of ideals and ideologies around, oh, once you have that break with reality, you're always going to be
mm,
there.
mm.
That thing is always going to just spark in your head once in a while. You're never the same. So, what's healing from postpartum psychosis like from somebody who has healed from postpartum
Oh
psychosis
my
and looks
goodness.
radiant, by the way?
Thank you so much. It was a journey. My son, who I gave birth to during that time, he's 2 years old, almost 2.5 years old now. And it took every bit of a year and a half to 2 years for me to feel normal again. And still kind of dealing with some of the side effects. One of the biggest side effects afterwards is low confidence and feeling
Mm,
like you have to hide because of the shame associated with dealing with mental health disorder. And we know that it's
mm,
not any mom's fault. It's not
mhm.
your fault. If you're dealing with this, whether it be postpartum psychosis, anxiety, or depression, any mood that disorder that comes from giving birth, it's not your fault. So I think during that time, it's really, really important to make sure that we have the support necessary to even help mom realize that aside from medication, because they give you medication, a ton of medication to get you back to reality. I had to not breastfeed. I had to stop breastfeeding, and in the U.S., I'm not sure if it affected your country either, but during that time in 2022, like the spring of 2022, there was a formula shortage, and I'm an avid
Yeah,
breastfeeder. I
I heard
breastfed my
about
oldest son.
that.
Yeah, I breastfed my oldest son for 2 years. My younger son, at 6 weeks, I had to stop breastfeeding because apparently the prolactin from the hormone secretion when you breastfeed can increase the signs of postpartum psychosis, and so they recommended that I stop breastfeeding,
Really?
and that was very difficult. So that led to depression. That led to me feeling detached and unable to fully bond with my son, and also gave me more anxiety because there was a formula shortage at the same time. So it was very, very difficult to overcome that. I would say 6 months after I was done taking medication. And so for the remaining year of trying to recover, it was mostly just mentally gaining back the confidence. Most women following postpartum psychosis deal with a period of depression and low self confidence. And I dealt with every bit of that. My faith in God is what helped me to overcome that as well. Just connecting with a strong group of supportive women who, told me that everything is going to be okay and you are who you were before and you're who you are after. I think that we have this stigma that once a person has a mental health disorder, they're forever damaged and can never be healed. But
Hmm.
if someone has cancer and they go through chemotherapy and now they're in remission, we're like, yay, they're healed. Or, if they have a bout with diabetes or high blood pressure and they take medication, we're not looking at them as, oh, they're sickly and, they're unable to ever perform in this world again. But for some reason, when it comes to mental health disorders, as soon as a person is recovered, we still forever cast them aside and they'll never be well again. And that's not fair. Just like
Absolutely.
any other organ, just like any other part of the body, when it goes through its period of sickness and infirmity, if it has opportunity to recover, it will. It will. And so
Mm,
I'm living witness. I've returned to practicing dentistry, although I did, have some things that I lost in the process of um, dealing with the aftermath of postpartum psychosis. I gained so much more. I'm
mm,
healthier, I'm wiser, I can educate other women to help make sure that they come out as well. And, I'm more available for my family and I'm not shameful because I know that it wasn't my fault.
oh, God, Dr. Jess, thank you. That was melody to my ears. So what I hear you say is that there is full recovery from mental health disorders, including
Yes,
psychosis.
ma'am.
And all of those aftermath that we see is not the psychosis itself.
Mm-hmm.
The psychosis is gone. It's just the mostly the behavior of people
Mm-hmm.
around, and again the person's how the person perceives how they're received now.
Right.
Again, this stems from all of the stigmas that surrounds it. So the psychosis itself is not
Mm-hmm.
there. It's just now you're thinking, oh my God, do people trust me enough now?
Mm-hmm.
Or, am I sure that I'm okay?
Right.
We then tend to second guess ourselves. So I hear you. All mood disorders are
Yes.
treatable.
Ma'am.
Complete recovery is possible with the proper help,
Yes, ma'am.
but including psychosis, but all of those other ones, we could leverage on, our support system,
Mm-hmm.
people who will speak life into you. And if you're a person of faith, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, find something you believe in that is bigger than you. I do not know how people do
Yeah.
it, but find something that is bigger than you, because this world on its own, crazy,
Yes. 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 Yes, indeed.
crazy. Right. I think that you have been through the long and short of all the things that I had in mind about postpartum. I'm trying to make this as short as possible so that the replay won't be excruciating,
I'm like,
won't be
no,
too
it's an
long.
hour.
Right. I'm like that. But I think I've cracked the hack. I
Yes.
just put it on 1.5 or twice the speed and put earplugs in, and I'm
Same.
done.
Same. While
I'm
you're
done in
washing
half the
dishes or cooking
time.
dinner.
And
Yes.
I'm done in half the time. Thank you so much, Dr. Jess. So I was also thinking, what kind of support? Because I mean, you're a woman, you're a career woman, you went through all that number of years and all that, the excruciating medical school that
Yeah.
we all love to fear. So you have a full life. You have two children now. You're navigating a normal life. So we've talked about the home support, just, support the mom, make sure she's catching good enough
Mhm.
sleep, ensure that you protect her dignity if there needs to be an advocate.
Mhm.
I mean, I was watching your other interview and you were talking about how it was just culturally, how will I put it now, inappropriate. There was no hair, there was no comb appropriate for your African
Oh
hair.
my gosh.
And so and so I mean that would not apply to us because we're all Africans.
Yeah, see, I'm like, I gotta come
um
home.
you gotta come
I
home,
gotta
girl.
come
Like, we're
home.
waiting for you, we're waiting. But we do have our peculiarities as well. I mean, like when you were describing that, I imagined you a woman who already has been labeled with psychosis and then actually looks, all over the place,
Mhm.
was not something that was good in my mind. But
Mhm.
so you've talked about the support at home. Your parents were big advocates. Get her a comb, give her some shampoo. This is not, appropriate for her. So can you tell me a little bit more about that advocacy, the
Mhm.
role, how people can play that role,
Mhm.
and the impact that it may have on the mom who is recovering from psychosis? That's on one hand. And then on the other hand, I'd like to know what can be done at the work front, because at Haven we are trying to keep moms in jobs that they love and are great at.
Mhm.
We're trying to see how women can be supported enough at work so they climb up the career ladder like everybody else, and they don't have to sacrifice things that they love, that aspect of their lives that they love. So what kind of support will be required at work for a mom who is recovering from any mood disorder and one like psychosis?
So I know that the first part of the question, as far as advocacy is concerned, is just maintaining lines of communication, and reminding mom who she was before all of this. That that's still who she is. Psychosis has no bearing on her identity. It's just a small part of the tapestry of her quilt of who she really is. It's a small part.
Mhm.
It's a thread. It's not her identity. She doesn't become postpartum psychosis because she experiences it. It's just an experience, just like going to elementary school is an experience. You're not an elementary student once you graduate. And so
Right.
I think taking on that and making sure that the family has the right words to say to remind mother of that, it'll help. Also, just knowing that it's just a season. Um, you're not
Mhm.
going to be dealing with it forever. And when we are in the dark, it feels like forever. It really feels like forever.
Right.
And so it's a day by day. And sorry, part of my emotions from it, because just thinking about how I felt, how deep and dark I felt, like I'm just there by myself. It felt like I was in a hole. That's why when PSI Climb Out says climbing out of the dark, it really is climbing out of the dark. But just reminding the mom that this is not forever. This is not the death of you. This is a new birth.
Mhm.
This is a new reality, and we are going to get through it. So having that
Mm.
communication line open for not just the mother, but also the family as it relates to any facility that they may be at. Communicating, knowing what's going on, because I did feel that my family made sure that they called me and they asked me the right questions, like, are you eating? What kind of foods are you eating? What did you do with your hair? Did you get your hair lotion that I sent? That kind of stuff. And so because I was able to say yes, no, they were able to then contact, the charge nurse and say, hey, why hasn't she gotten these things? And so it helped me to feel that my family, despite the circumstances, they were still there for me. They couldn't be in the facility with me, but they were still there, and they were not letting up. They wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay. As far as career is
Absolutely.
concerned, unique part of it is that during that time, with me running a practice, I had to be away from my practice, and so I do feel that before a mother gives birth, regardless of whether or not she experiences any postpartum mood disorders, it's important to make sure that she has a plan in place for her time to be gone, whether it's
Mhm.
6 weeks, whether it's 12 weeks, but just a solid plan in place that if anything were to happen, I am secure. My family is secure. We have a roof over our head. Our bills will be paid, and I can take family medical leave. Well, at least in Arizona or the U.S., we have what's called FMLA, which is the Family Medical
Right.
Leave Act, and we have 12 weeks of secured job placement. So essentially, if let's say I was an employed dentist working for a company, as long as I've worked for that company for 3 months without being pregnant, then afterwards, if I were to have a child, they would cover up to 3 months of my leave, in that they cannot get rid of my job and say, oh, I'm going to give it to Susie Q over here. It's like, no, this is Dr. Jess's job when she comes back. Now, if you go beyond that 12 weeks, then obviously they have their prerogative. They have to run a business. But with that being said, just knowing that even if they don't keep your job, it'll be other opportunities there. I know that it's tough to part with that, but like if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't prioritize yourself and your family, what good is it to you?
Mm.
If your health is not of utmost importance, you're no good to anyone else. You have to fill your cup before you can
Absolutely.
pour out. And so I think having that mentality that, again, this time is for rest, bonding, and healing, and that be the priority no matter what, I think will carry us very far in making sure that we prioritize what's most important during that time, so that no matter what diagnosis a woman has, no matter what circumstances may arise, she knows at the forefront of her mind that all the other things will come, but the most important thing is me.
That's amazing. So for organizations, and one thing I found in my line of work is that many organizations really want to be supportive of new
Mm-hmm.
moms and moms generally, but they kind of just don't know what to do. So what are the things that you can recommend for organizations that are wanting to be supportive of moms in this situation, but are thinking, okay, so how do we
Mm-hmm.
support them? What is support for a mom who is recovering from postpartum psychosis at work?
I think having adequate medical coverage, and again, I'm not 100% sure of how things work in your country. I would love to learn. But I know for us here, like during the time that you're not working, you have no coverage. A lot of times,
Really?
yeah. So unless you enroll with a short-term disability plan, you typically don't have any income coming in, and so coverage wise, as far as healthcare, my benefit was that my husband's an educator, and so with his job, I had healthcare coverage. But
Right.
in the past, when I had my first son, I didn't have postpartum psychosis, so I didn't have that experience. But I was the one carrying the insurance bill at that time, and it
Right.
was if something like this were to happen during that time, I would have been out of healthcare coverage. And you can imagine the costs associated with receiving behavioral health services and the
Mm-hmm.
psychiatry and the mental health therapy and all of these added things that take place. And so, um,
The medication.
yeah, yeah, pharmaceuticals, it was huge, huge bill that I didn't have to experience this go round. But I do feel that that's important to make sure that all of that is in place. Now, it's difficult for me to say from the perspective of being in your country, because obviously, I don't really know exactly how it
No, these
works.
things apply. I mean, we also have things like healthcare, health insurance,
Hmm.
which is medical
Right.
coverage. yeah, so organizations can do well to provide those kind of extensive
Mhm.
medical insurance that will cover the total health of a mom
Mhm.
is one. That's what you've just said.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so any other one?
um, Aside from that, just providing the resource of, um, I mean, if there is, I know we have FMLA, which covers your job for the period of time that you're out. So if they have that resource available to where the mother can either work a modified job or, as far as hours are concerned, or um, abstain from working for a period of time to recover, that would be helpful as well. So I'm not sure if they have if there could be a particular policy in place where if a mother has a child, we are willing to allow for up to 3 months for a mom to recover, and should she return, she's eligible to work a part-time schedule or a modified schedule for up to an additional 3 months to allow for the sleep to come into play, because we all know babies don't sleep well until they get to half
They
a
don't.
year. And
They
so
do not.
I feel like if we're not prioritizing making sure that moms are healthy and we're just throwing them back out there after 6 weeks of, you know, um, delivery, I mean, I just feel like it's not fair. Babies typically are not sleeping through the night, usually until they're able to, like, have a full stomach and feel satiated. And so if we were to give moms up to 6 months to have that time to recover before returning back to work, it would be great. But if we're not able to do that fully, then let's consider giving them the 3 months, and then from there modify the schedule to allow for an additional 3 months to gain their bearings and develop a routine and get some rest. Because I mean, goodness, we're always burning the candle on both ends, and that's how we increase our risk of developing these mood disorders.
Oh, that is melody. I mean, we look forward to a day when most
Mm-hmm.
organizations, let me not say all, let me not say all. So yeah, so Dr. Jess, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, ma'am.
But is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of your personal experience? That's one. Any other thing that maybe I didn't mention because of my ignorance, or just in terms of
Mm-hmm.
experience on the matter? So because I mean, when you go through something, you feel it deeply, and there is only so much. There's a little, as you said, people fall through the cracks. The
Mm-hmm.
cracks, as my own opinion, is the ignorance of
Mm-hmm.
everybody else. That's the cracks. So, is there any crack in my perspective? So, things that maybe is important to talk about, but I've not brushed through. That's one. And two, what would you say to a mom who is recovering from psychosis and the family who is having to support her?
Okay.
Oh my God, that was a lot of
No,
questions
so
at the same time.
I got two. So we're going to fill in the cracks and then support, ask or tell what the moms need for moving forward if they are recovering from postpartum psychosis.
You
So
know,
the biggest one,
just
mhm,
talk to them like direct.
yes,
This
ma'am.
mom, what would you have loved to hear,
Yes,
you know,
ma'am.
in that situation?
As far as any gaps that we may have missed, I do feel that Postpartum Support International, it bears weight to mention that there are resources available. There are support groups available, not just for mom, but for fathers as well. And we have to utilize these resources because they're there. The support groups help moms to be able to talk to other moms who may be in the same stage of life. And I know we're stronger together. And so utilizing those resources and being able to identify them will be very helpful to help mothers feel like they're not alone. And to any mom
Absolutely.
who is currently climbing out of the dark, know that you're not alone. Know that it is not your fault, but know that you also can make a full recovery. I am a living witness that you will heal with help. And so, to the families that are supporting moms, just make sure that you continue to be there and know that you make a world of a difference by having the knowledge and being able to be an advocate for her health and well-being.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jess. And Haven Advocacy also is like an offshoot of PSI in Nigeria because I mean we have our cultural differences
Mm-hmm.
from from the average American culture, and it's so surprising as well that even in PSI support groups, it's very most people who show up are not black. I don't know what's wrong with us.
Really?
No, and I think there's a lot of advocacy on that, and that's why we have the what do they call it? The
PMHA, PLC,
PMHAP,
mm-hmm.
yeah. So the ones that are so because and I think that that also is an offshoot of just identifying those little cultural
Mm-hmm.
differences, those the ways that things differ in terms of how maybe white folks will do their
Mm-hmm.
stuff and black folks. Yeah, so at Haven we also have these support groups. So if you're in Nigeria or in Africa, reach out to us. That's what we do. We have support groups and we have resources like Dr. Jess B on speed dial. I mean, if you're looking for people who will pour into you, we have all of those kind of resources because the support I think is really
Yes,
critical,
ma'am.
maybe just as critical as the medication,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Jess. And as for because I'm really so passionate about just organizations stepping up to support moms that work in them. Most of our lives are spent at work. It's
Mm-hmm.
ironic if we really think about it, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, that and then you take out the number of hours you're asleep, you find out that you're at work quite a lot.
Right, right.
Right. So yeah, so those are some ways that you can support moms, especially those who are recovering from mood disorders like psychosis. Thank you very much,
Yes.
Dr. Jespi, for your time. I just want to sit here and stare at
Oh,
you all night.
and let me say, I just appreciate the work that you're doing, and I know that you will change many lives and help support so many mothers. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to connect.
Thank you, Dr. Jess, and I hope that next time when we call, you're going to be just as eager. You're going to be there waiting for us, or maybe if we need one resource or we need some form of
I'm coming to
wisdom,
Nigeria next time.
girl, we are waiting. It's gonna be like you have to be here to understand. My Nigerian folks know nobody parties like the
I already
Nigerian.
know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jess. Any final words before we end the live today?
Well, um, I am 1 in 5. So if I can recover, know that you can too. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share. I will be around. See you next time.
Thank you, Dr. Jess B. Oh, by the way, I am 1 in 5 too. Dr. Jess B is not only 1 in 5, she's 2 in 1,000. 1 in 5, two in
Yes.
1,000, and I am 1 in 5 as well. You are not alone. You're not to blame. There is absolutely nothing you did to bring this on yourself. Find people who understand and who will support you, your OB, your midwife. The hospital is full of tons of resources. And we're working very, very, very hard to infiltrate many hospitals to start the conversation about maternal mental health just because there's a lot of care for our bodies, but very rarely do anyone ask, how are you?
Yes. Yes.
Beyond the urine test, which is great, beyond the blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
which is really, really important. Yeah, so we're beginning to stir up those conversations. Please reach out. You're not alone. And you can find help to climb out of the darkness. Have a good night and good afternoon for Dr. Jespi.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye. That was a lot. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you for everyone that joined. That was such a conversation. I don't want to use an adjective because postpartum psychosis, many of us in our lifetimes would never meet anyone that has postpartum psychosis. I have never met one in person. I know Dr. Jess B virtually. I don't know any mom, but they exist. And even if it is 2 in 1,000 or 1 in 500, every single human being matters. And these things are very important. It's important for us to change our perspective, how we think about these issues. It's important for us to end the stigma, you know, offer more support, get more education, climb out of our ignorance so that our friends, our moms, our sisters, our wives, our spouses can climb out of the darkness. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good evening. Have a good day wherever in the world you are. Good night.